The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Rachel Morgan held it in her hands, plain manila, no return address, her name written in careful block letters, and felt her chest tighten in a way it hadn't in years. 12 years of living as a ghost in your own skin teaches you to stop hoping. Teaches you that unmarked mail never brings relief, only new complications. But the weight of this one felt different. Inside was a single photograph. A red baseball cap. Small, worn at the brim, the Red Sox logo faded from sun and salt. Rachel's coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered across the kitchen floor. She didn't notice. Couldn't look away from the image in her hands. She knew that hat. She'd bought it at Fenway Park 3 summers before everything ended. Watched her 10-year-old daughter wear it every single day that spring, pulled low over brown eyes that were already learning to read wind on water. That hat should have been at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for 12 years, buried with secrets that were supposed to stay buried. Rachel turned the photograph over with shaking hands. 7 words in the same block letters, I know what happened to them. Have you ever spent years building a life on top of a lie? Have you ever convinced yourself that silence is the same as innocence? That if you grieve publicly enough, loudly enough, if you play the victim long enough, eventually the performance becomes reality? Rachel had. For 4,380 days, she'd been the woman who lost everything. The tragic widow. The mother without a child. The face of unspeakable loss in a small harbor town where everyone knew everyone's business, except hers. But someone knew. Someone had always known. And now they were ready to talk. This is the story of a father and daughter who sailed away one May morning and never came home. A story the Coast Guard closed as a tragic accident. A story a community mourned and then moved on from. A story that was never supposed to have a second act. But 12 years later, an envelope arrived. And everything Rachel Morgan had carefully constructed, every tear, every memorial speech, every moment of public grief, was about to collapse. Because what happened on May 18, 2013 wasn't an accident. It was a plan that went catastrophically wrong. And the person responsible wasn't the ocean, wasn't the weather, wasn't fate or bad luck or any of the comfortable explanations people tell themselves when they can't face the truth. The person responsible was standing in a kitchen, staring at a photograph, knowing that after 12 years of running from the past had finally caught up. Before we go any further, if you need to know what's in that envelope, if you need to understand how a routine sailing trip became a murder investigation, if you're asking yourself how a mother could keep a secret this devastating for this long, you need to stay with this story. Subscribe now, because what you're about to discover will make you question everything you think you know about grief, guilt, and how far someone will go to protect themselves. The truth about Ben and Lily Morgan has been buried for 12 years. But the ocean keeps nothing forever. And neither do people. Rockport, Massachusetts was the kind of town where the ocean dictated everything. Weather reports came first. Fishing schedules second. Everyone's plans bent around tide charts and wind forecasts. The harbor was the heart of the community, and the people who worked the water were its pulse. Ben Morgan was one of those people. Not a fisherman. He made his living as an industrial electrician, the kind of troubleshooter companies called when systems failed and no one else could figure out why. He'd show up with his tool bag and his methodical mind, trace problems back to their source, leave behind equipment that hummed smoothly again. Quiet competence. That's what people said about Ben. The man who fixed things without needing credit for it. But the water was where Ben came alive. He kept a 28-foot Pearson sloop at the harbor. Called her Sea Finch. The name wasn't random. Finches migrate thousands of miles but always find their way home. Ben liked that. Liked the idea that no matter how far you traveled, you could always return to where you belonged. He'd been sailing since 16. Knew these waters the way some people know their own neighborhoods. Could read weather in the color of the sky, predict swells by the way gulls flew, navigate by instinct even when fog rolled in thick enough to blind. Other sailors asked Ben for advice. The harbormaster trusted his judgment. Parents pointed him out to their kids as an example of how to do things right, safe, prepared, responsible. Ben maintained Sea Finch like she was headed across an ocean instead of just up the coast. Replaced rigging on schedule, not when it broke. Kept 3 fire extinguishers when regulations only required 1. Wrote dates on every piece of equipment with permanent marker. Filed float plans for every trip, even the short ones. He had an accordion folder under the hall table at home, stuffed with receipts for every repair, every upgrade, every $10 part he'd replaced over the years. His wife used to tease him about it. Who keeps receipts for a shackle from 5 years ago? Who documents oil changes on a boat engine like it's a commercial aircraft? Ben did. Because details mattered. Because the ocean didn't forgive carelessness. Rachel came to the marriage from landlocked people. Her family vacationed in mountains, not at harbors. But she learned to love the water through Ben, or at least she learned to tolerate it. Learned to coil lines properly, to duck when he called out warnings, to read his face before reading the clouds. Their marriage had a rhythm. Not passionate, but steady. Comfortable in the way long marriages become when you stop expecting butterflies and start appreciating predictability. They had Friday night pasta. Always the same recipe. Always at the kitchen table, no phones, no television. Just the 3 of them talking about their days. Ben would ask Lily about school, real questions, not the dismissive, "How was your day?" that kids learn to ignore. He listened like her 5th grade social dramas actually mattered. And to him they did. Lily was 10 years old that spring. Brown hair that never stayed contained, no matter how many elastic bands Rachel used. A gap between her front teeth she was self-conscious about. Freckles across her nose from too many afternoons in the sun. She'd grown up thinking boats were normal, the way some kids grow up thinking everyone has a pool or a dog. By 7, she could tie a bowline. By 8, she knew port from starboard without hesitation. By 10, she could feel when the sail needed trimming, when the boat was working too hard, when everything was balanced just right. Ben taught her the same way he approached everything else. Patiently, methodically, treating her like a competent crew member who happened to be small. He bought her a child-sized life jacket before they'd even purchased a crib. Said the ocean would teach their daughter to think in 3 dimensions: wind, tide, and whatever you forgot to account for. On weekends when the weather was decent, they'd walk down to the harbor after dinner just to check on Sea Finch. Not because anything was wrong, just because Ben liked to see her. Liked to run his hand along the rail, check the dock lines, make sure everything was secure. Lily would climb aboard and pretend to steer while Ben inspected fittings, and Rachel sat on the dock watching them, wondering how she'd ended up in this life. It was a good life. From the outside, anyway. Ben made decent money when the work was steady. Rachel worked reception at a medical clinic, handling insurance paperwork and appointment scheduling. They owned their house, small but paid off. Had a reliable car. Took modest vacations. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable, safe. That spring, though, money got tighter than usual. Ben's contractor cut everyone's hours. A big municipal job kept getting delayed. Rachel picked up extra shifts, staying late to process paperwork that made her eyes ache. They had a small argument one evening about the boat insurance premium. Not a real fight, just the tired arithmetic of a household trying to balance needs against wants. Ben touched her face and apologized. "Sea Finch is our summer," he said. "We keep what keeps us together." Rachel nodded and smiled and felt nothing. Because the truth was, Rachel had stopped feeling much of anything for Ben years earlier. Somewhere between Lily's 3rd birthday and her 7th, the marriage had gone from partnership to routine to something closer to roommates who happened to share a child. Ben was kind, reliable, everything a husband was supposed to be on paper. But Rachel felt trapped. Trapped by a life she'd chosen too young. Trapped by a town too small. Trapped by a husband too decent to justify leaving. You can't divorce a good man just because you're bored. Just because you lie awake at night wondering if this is all there is. Just because you've started noticing other men, their smiles, their attention, the way they make you remember you used to be someone other than Ben Morgan's wife and Lily's mother. So when Thomas Brennan started paying attention, Rachel didn't look away. Thomas was the harbormaster. 42, divorced, handsome in that weathered way men who work outside tend to be. He knew everyone at the harbor, remembered names, asked follow-up questions about things you'd mentioned weeks earlier. Made you feel seen. made Rachel feel seen. It started innocently enough. Conversations that lasted longer than necessary. Coffee that turned into lunch. Lunch that turned into dinner in towns where nobody from Rockport would recognize them. Rachel told herself it was just friendship. Just someone to talk to. Just a distraction from the monotony of her real life. But by winter, it had become something else. Something Rachel knew was wrong but couldn't seem to stop. Something that made her feel alive again, even as it hollowed out what was left of her integrity. By spring, Rachel was in love with Thomas Brennan. Or at least, she'd convinced herself she was. And she'd convinced herself that the only thing standing between her and happiness was a marriage she couldn't afford to end. Divorce meant splitting assets they didn't have. Meant lawyers they couldn't pay for. Meant disrupting Lily's entire life. Meant becoming the woman who abandoned a good man for no reason anyone would understand. So Rachel started thinking about other options. Darker options. Options she'd never seriously considered before Thomas said, late one night in a hotel room 40 minutes from home, "What if you didn't have to divorce him? What if you were just free?" Rachel should have shut it down immediately. Should have been horrified. Should have recognized the dangerous territory they were entering. Instead, she whispered, "How?" And Thomas started planning. The plan was simple. At least, that's what Thomas kept saying. Simple plans had fewer variables. Fewer things that could go wrong. Ben would take Sea Finch out alone on a Friday morning. He did that sometimes. Solo sails to clear his head, to think through problems, to just be alone with the water. Thomas would file the float plan like always. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would raise suspicion later. Thomas would wait until Ben was in a secluded cove, away from other boats, away from witnesses. He'd approach on his personal vessel, something he did regularly as harbormaster, checking on recreational sailors, making sure everyone was safe. A friendly conversation, maybe a warning about weather. Completely normal. And then, when the moment was right, an accident would happen. Ben would fall. Hit his head. Go overboard. The cold water would do the rest. Thomas would make sure of it. Then he'd capsize the boat to make it look like Ben had been thrown during a gust of wind. Leave Sea Finch to sink. Report nothing. Let the Coast Guard search in vain when Ben failed to return. Tragic solo sailing accident. Happens more often than people think. Even to experienced sailors. Rachel hated how easy Thomas made it sound. Hated how casually he discussed the mechanics of drowning, the water temperature tables, the currents that would carry a body away from search zones. But she also hated how much she wanted it to work. They picked Friday, May 18th. The forecast looked perfect. Clear morning, mild afternoon, a front moving in late Saturday that would give cover to why the boat might have been lost. Ben had already mentioned wanting to get out on the water that weekend. All Rachel had to do was encourage it. Suggest he take some time for himself. Tell him she and Lily would have a girls' day while he sailed. Simple. The night before, Rachel barely slept. She lay next to Ben in the dark, listening to him breathe, wondering if she was actually capable of this. Wondering what kind of person plans her husband's murder and then makes him breakfast in the morning. But when dawn came, she got up, made coffee, started moving through the routine like it was any other day. Because it had to look like any other day. Ben was already awake, packing the cooler with sandwiches and juice. He'd loaded gear into the truck before Rachel even came downstairs. He was humming. Actually humming. Happy about the trip. Looking forward to a day on the water. Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. Not enough to stop. Not enough to confess. Just enough to hurt. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee she knew she wouldn't drink. "Want to catch the morning tide," Ben said. "Should be a perfect day for it." Rachel nodded, smiled, felt her face doing the right things while her mind screamed. And then Lily appeared, standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, that red baseball cap already on her head, her life jacket unzipped over her shirt. She was grinning. That gap-toothed smile that made her look younger than 10. Made her look like she still believed the world was safe and parents didn't lie and families stayed together forever. "Can I go with you, Dad? Please?" Rachel's heart stopped. No. This wasn't the plan. Lily wasn't supposed to be part of this. Lily was supposed to stay home, safe, innocent, untouched by what was about to happen. "Sweetie, Dad's going alone this time," Rachel said, trying to keep her voice normal, trying not to sound desperate. "It's just a quick overnight. You and I can—" "Actually," Ben interrupted, looking at Lily with that soft expression he got when she asked for things, "if you want to come, Captain, I'd love the company." "Really?" Lily bounced on her toes. "Really, really? Really, really? But you've got 5 minutes to pack a bag. Move it." Lily squealed and ran upstairs. Rachel stood frozen in the kitchen, her mind racing through calculations. She had to stop this. Had to think of a reason Lily couldn't go. A reason that wouldn't sound suspicious. "Ben, are you sure? It's short notice." "Rachel, she wants to go. When's the last time we did something fun that didn't cost money we don't have? This is free. This is what we have." The guilt in his voice cut her. He thought they were struggling because of bad luck. Because the economy was tight and jobs were scarce. He had no idea Rachel had been siphoning money for months, preparing to leave him. Preparing for a life that started after he was gone. "I just think she'll be fine. You know she's good on the boat. And I'll have her back by tomorrow afternoon. Promise." Ben kissed Rachel's forehead, grabbed his keys, whistled for Lily to hurry up. And Rachel stood there, watching her plan disintegrate, knowing she had minutes to stop this and no idea how. She grabbed her phone the second Ben walked out to load Lily's bag. Went into the bathroom, locked the door, called Thomas. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Again voicemail. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type the text. "Thomas. Lily is with him. Abort. Do not go out there. Call me now." She watched the screen. Saw the message deliver. Waited for the little red notification. Nothing. She tried calling again. And again. And again. Nothing. By the time Rachel came out of the bathroom, Ben and Lily were already in the truck. Rachel walked outside, feeling like she was moving through water. Everything slow and heavy and wrong. She stood on the driveway, phone clutched in her hand, trying to think of something, anything, that would stop them from leaving. "Mom, come take a picture." Lily called from the truck window. Rachel's body moved on autopilot. Raised the phone. Framed the shot. Ben behind the wheel, Lily next to him in that red cap and bright life jacket, both of them smiling like this was the start of a perfect day. Rachel's finger pressed the button. The shutter clicked. The image saved. The last photograph of her daughter alive. "Love you, Mummy. Love you too, baby." The words came out strangled. The truck pulled away. Rachel stood in the driveway, watching them disappear down the street, her phone still in her hand. She called Thomas again the second they were out of sight. Voicemail. She ran to her car. Drove to the harbor. Thomas's truck wasn't in the parking lot. His office was locked. He was already gone. Already on the water. Heading toward the coordinates where Ben's float plan said he'd be. And he had no idea Lily was on that boat. Rachel sat in her car in the empty parking lot and called Thomas 17 more times. Left voicemails that got progressively more frantic. Sent texts that went unread. She wanted to scream. Wanted to drive her car into the ocean. Wanted to undo every choice that had led to this moment. But all she could do was wait. Wait and pray that Thomas would check his phone. That he'd see her messages and turn around. That he'd abort before he got there. That her daughter would come home safe. At 11:40, Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from Ben. A photo. Lily at the helm, tongue stuck out in concentration, small hands gripping the wheel like she was commanding an entire fleet. The message said, "Captain L." Rachel stared at the image. Her daughter. Still alive. Still happy. Still believing this was just another sailing trip with Dad. She texted back, "Tell her not to lose my crew overboard." Added heart emojis. Made it look normal. Made it look like she wasn't dying inside. She tried Thomas again. Still nothing. At 1:10, another text from Ben. "Perfect out here." 3 words that Rachel would replay in her mind for the next 12 years. 3 words that meant her husband had no idea what was coming. That everything still felt safe. that the world hadn't ended yet. Rachel stared at those words until they stopped making sense. And then she did something she would never admit to anyone. Something that would become the darkest secret she carried. She got back in her car, drove to a marina 30 minutes away where nobody knew her, rented a small motorboat, paid cash, said she wanted to do some fishing. The kid at the dock didn't ask questions, just handed her keys and pointed her toward the water. Rachel told herself she was going out there to stop it, to intercept Thomas before he reached Sea Finch, to wave him off, to make him see that Lily was there, to abort the plan in person if she couldn't reach him by phone. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was going out there to watch, to make sure it happened the way it was supposed to make sure Thomas followed through, to make sure that even with Lily there, the plan didn't fall apart. Because if Thomas backed out now, if he left Ben alive after all the planning and all the risk, then everything Rachel had done, every lie, every secret meeting, every moment of betrayal, would be for nothing. So she drove the rented boat out toward the coordinates she'd memorized from Ben's float plan, stayed far enough back that she wouldn't be noticed, found a position behind a cluster of rocks where she could see Sea Finch in the distance but stay hidden. And she watched Ben and Lily on the deck, moving around the boat, doing whatever it is sailors do when they think they're alone. Watched the sky start to shift, clouds building faster than the forecast predicted. Watched another boat appear on the horizon. Thomas. Rachel's breath caught. This was it. This was the moment everything would either work or collapse. She should have driven her boat over there. Should have screamed. Should have done something to stop what was about to happen. But she didn't. She stayed hidden behind the rocks. And she watched her husband die. From 200 yards away, hidden behind jagged rocks worn smooth by centuries of tide, Rachel watched Thomas's boat approach Sea Finch. She'd killed the engine 10 minutes earlier, letting the small vessel drift into position where she could see but not be seen. The water was deceptively calm, peaceful, the kind of afternoon that made people forget the ocean could kill you. Thomas moved slowly, carefully. His boat came alongside Sea Finch at an angle that looked casual, friendly, like he'd just happened to be in the area. Rachel could see Ben on deck, could see him wave, could see him gesture for Thomas to come aboard. No alarm, no suspicion. Lily sat in the cockpit with a book, that red cap still on her head. She glanced up when Thomas climbed aboard, then went back to reading. She'd seen Thomas 100 times at the harbor. He was just another adult, someone Dad knew. Rachel's chest felt like it was caving in. She should start the engine, should drive over there, should scream, but she didn't. She watched. Ben and Thomas talked. From this distance, Rachel couldn't hear words, could only read body language. For the first few minutes, everything looked normal. Then something shifted. Ben's posture stiffened. He took a step back. Thomas moved closer. Their positions went from conversational to confrontational in a heartbeat. Ben was shaking his head, pointing, his mouth moving in what looked like anger. Thomas's hands came up, placating, trying to calm Ben down. But Ben wasn't calming down. Lily looked up from her book, suddenly alert. Then Ben shoved Thomas. Not hard, but enough. Enough to break the boundary between talking and fighting. Thomas grabbed Ben's shirt, pulled him close. They were face to face now, shouting. Ben tried to pull away. Thomas held on. Lily screamed. Rachel heard it across the water, high and sharp and terrified. The two men broke apart. Both turned toward Lily. Ben moved toward his daughter. Thomas blocked him. They collided, not a fight, exactly. A struggle. Two men grabbing, pushing. Ben trying to reach Lily. Thomas trying to restrain him. Then Ben's foot caught something. A cleat, a line. The edge of the cockpit. He fell. His body twisted. His head connected with the boom. He dropped into the cockpit like his strings had been cut. Lily's second scream was worse than the first. She threw herself at her father, grabbed his shoulders, shook him. Thomas stood frozen, staring down at Ben's motionless body. Lily looked up at Thomas. Even from 200 yards away, Rachel could see the terror in her daughter's face. Thomas bent down, put his hands on Ben's shoulders, tried to move him. Ben's head lolled. Unconscious. Or worse. Then Thomas stopped trying to help. He looked around. Looked at the empty water. Looked at the unconscious man. Looked at the terrified child. And he grabbed Ben under the arms and dragged him toward the side of the boat. Rachel's mind couldn't process what she was seeing. Thomas was supposed to make it look like an accident. But this was something uglier. More desperate. He was dumping Ben's body over the side. Lily screamed. Launched herself at Thomas. Hit him with small fists. Thomas caught her wrists. Held her back. Ben's body slid halfway over the rail. Then Thomas lifted Ben's legs and pushed him the rest of the way over. The splash was small. Barely visible. A man-sized disruption in water that swallowed him immediately. Lily tore free and threw herself against the rail. Leaned over so far Rachel thought she'd go over too. She was sobbing. Reaching toward the water where her father had disappeared. Thomas grabbed her. Pulled her back. Held her even as she fought him. Then Lily went still. Rachel watched her daughter's body go rigid. Watched her pull back just enough to look up at Thomas's face. Lily knew. Knew this wasn't an accident. Knew Thomas had just killed her father. She twisted violently in his grip. Broke free. And threw herself overboard. Jumped deliberately. Arms wrapped around her torso. Life jacket bright against dark water. She surfaced. Started swimming away from the boat in strong, desperate strokes. Thomas stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he dove in after her. Rachel watched him surface. Watched him swim toward Lily with powerful strokes. Watched him grab her life jacket. Watched Lily fight. They struggled in the water. Lily kicking, thrashing. Thomas holding on. Trying to pull her back toward the boat. Or trying to pull her under. Rachel couldn't tell. The struggle went on too long. Lily's movements started to slow. The cold water, 54 degrees. Survivable in a life jacket. Fatal if you panicked. The water churned. Bodies disappeared and reappeared. Then the sky opened up. The squall that wasn't supposed to hit until evening arrived 3 hours early. Rain came down in sheets so thick Rachel lost sight of Sea Finch completely. Lost sight of everything. She started her engine on instinct. Pointed the bow toward shore. Rain hit her face like thrown stones. The squall lasted 6 minutes. When it cleared, Rachel looked back. The cove was empty. No boat, no people, no sign anyone had been there at all. Just water. Flat and gray and impossibly indifferent. Rachel turned the boat toward shore and drove. Didn't look back. Didn't stop. By the time she reached the marina, the sun was breaking through clouds. The kid at the dock took her keys and asked if she'd caught anything. No, Rachel said. Nothing. She drove home. Sat on the floor of Lily's room and stared at nothing while her mind replayed what she'd seen. Ben's head hitting the boom. Thomas pushing him overboard. Lily jumping. The struggle. The squall. The empty water. Her daughter was dead. Her husband was dead. And Rachel had watched it happen from 200 yards away without lifting a finger to stop it. Her phone rang at 8:30 that night. Thomas. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I tried to save her. She jumped and I couldn't. The water was so cold and she panicked and then the squall hit and I lost her. I lost both of them. Rachel said nothing. It was an accident. Ben hit his head. And Lily, she was so scared. She fought me. I tried, Rachel. Where are they? I don't know. The current. The squall. I searched but I couldn't find them. You left them. I had to. If someone saw me, Rachel, we can't tell anyone I was there. Rachel hung up. She sat in Lily's room until dawn. Didn't cry. Didn't move. Just sat with the terrible knowledge that she'd done this. In a few hours, when enough time had passed for Ben to be officially late, she would call the Coast Guard and pretend to be surprised. Pretend to be terrified. Pretend she didn't already know they'd find nothing. She would become the grieving wife. The devastated mother. The woman who lost everything. And she would have to be convincing. The Coast Guard searched for 72 hours. Rachel stood on docks, answered questions, provided photos, and cried on cue. She was perfect. The devastated wife who couldn't understand how an experienced sailor simply vanished. The mother clinging to impossible hope. A volunteer found the cushion on day 2. White foam wedged against rocks, stitching intact, no signs of catastrophic damage. It could have been from any boat, but the serial number matched Sea Finch's registration. The search shifted from rescue to recovery. Then quietly it ended. No bodies, no wreckage, no answers the ocean was willing to give back. 6 months later, an envelope arrived at Rachel's house. No return address. Inside, a note on plain paper. I found items from your husband's boat. If you want the Coast Guard to know, keep refusing to pay. If you want me to stay quiet, $500 cash. Instructions to follow. David Pelletier, a salvage operator with a criminal record and a storage unit full of evidence he should have reported. He'd found Sea Finch after the squall passed, capsized but floating. He'd stripped what he could carry and left the hull to sink. And now he wanted payment for his silence. Rachel paid. Every month for 12 years. Cash withdrawals that bled her savings dry but kept the questions buried. Because if Pelletier talked, investigators would dig deeper. Would find the affair. Would find the phone calls. Would find Thomas. Would find her. The community moved on. New families filled the harbor. Lily's memorial scholarship was funded and forgotten. By year 5, Rachel was just background tragedy. By year 10, even that had faded. She kept Lily's room intact for 7 years. Kept Ben's tools organized exactly as he'd left them. Played the role so thoroughly she almost believed it herself. Almost forgot that she'd watched her daughter drown and done nothing. Thomas stayed as the harbormaster. Helped coordinate the search he knew would find nothing. Spoke at the memorial service. Stood next to Rachel at anniversary vigils, his hand on her shoulder in what looked like community support. They never spoke about what happened. Never acknowledged what they'd done. The affair ended the day Ben and Lily died. Rachel and Thomas became strangers who shared a terrible secret and nothing else. Until the morning a different envelope arrived. Plain manila. No return address. Inside, a photograph of Lily's red baseball cap. And 7 words that made Rachel's coffee mug shatter on the Kit Lewis floor. I know what happened to them. 10 days after the envelope arrived, Detective Patricia Lewis from Massachusetts State Police knocked on Rachel's door. Rachel had spent those 10 days in quiet terror. Someone knew. Someone was watching. She'd checked every security camera, driven past Thomas's house twice, even hired a private investigator to trace the envelope's origin. Nothing. And now a detective was at her door. Mrs. Morgan, I need to talk to you about your husband and daughter's disappearance. Lewis explained that they'd arrested David Pelletier for insurance fraud the previous week. Found his storage unit. Found items from 17 missing vessels, including Sea Finch. Rachel's blood went cold. Pelletier, the man she'd been paying for 12 years. The man who was supposed to stay silent. Lewis slid an evidence bag across Rachel's Kit Lewis table. Inside, a handheld VHF radio with an engraving. B. Morgan, always check the weather. And a red baseball cap with a faded Red Sox logo. The same cap from the photograph. The envelope. Someone else had sent that envelope knowing Pelletier had these items. Someone else knew. Mr. Pelletier claims he found your husband's boat capsized the day they disappeared. Says he salvaged items and never reported it. He's being charged with obstruction and evidence tampering. Rachel forced herself to speak. Did he see them? Were they? He claims he didn't see anyone in the water. Just the capsized boat. Lewis paused. Mrs. Morgan, did you know David Pelletier before your husband's death? No. I've never heard that name. Strange. Because your bank records show regular cash withdrawals. $500 to $800 monthly for the past 12 years. Starting 6 months after your family disappeared. Can you explain that? Rachel's hands trembled. Personal expenses. I don't remember. I've been reviewing the original investigation, Lewis continued, watching Rachel's face carefully. Your husband's float plan said he'd be south of Gloucester. But Mr. Pelletier found the boat 4 miles north. Any idea why your husband would have changed course? No. Ben always stuck to his plans. I also pulled phone records from that day. Lewis opened a folder. You called Thomas Brennan, the harbormaster, 17 times between 7:52 a.m. and 12:15 p.m. That's before your husband was even late. Why? Rachel's throat went dry. I had a bad feeling. I wanted to make sure someone was watching for them. Your first call was at 7:52. Your husband had just left. Why were you already panicking? I'm a mother, I worry. Lewis leaned forward. Mrs. Morgan, I've reviewed 8 months of phone records. 214 calls between you and Thomas Brennan. Many late at night. Some lasting over an hour. Hotel charges in Gloucester on your credit card. Restaurant bills for 2. She slid the receipts across the table. Were you having an affair with Thomas Brennan? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rachel's carefully constructed 12 years began to crack. Yes, she whispered, but I ended it before Ben died. It had nothing to do with, didn't it? Lewis's voice was sharp. 17 panicked calls the morning your husband disappeared. To your former lover, who happens to be the harbormaster who filed your husband's float plan and coordinated the search in the wrong location. 12 years of cash withdrawals to a man who had evidence from your husband's boat. And now, someone else, someone who isn't Pelletier, sent you a photograph of your daughter's hat with a note saying they know what happened. Rachel's face went white. How do you know about? We're monitoring your mail, Mrs. Morgan. The envelope was intercepted and copied before delivery. We wanted to see how you'd react. Lewis stood. I think you need a lawyer, Mrs. Morgan. Because this doesn't look like a tragic accident anymore. This looks like murder. And you look like you've been covering it up for 12 years. Rachel lawyered up immediately, refused to answer further questions. But Lewis had enough to move forward. She brought Thomas Brennan in the next day. Thomas didn't have a lawyer waiting. He walked into the interrogation room thinking he was still just a witness. Lewis confronted him with the phone records, the affair, the suspicious timing. Thomas broke within an hour. I went out there to talk to him. That's all. Just talk. But Ben already knew about the affair. Someone had told him. He was furious. We fought. He fell. Hit his head on the boom. It was an accident. And the little girl? Thomas's voice cracked. She jumped in after him. I tried to save her. The water was so cold. She panicked. I couldn't hold on to her. Then the squall hit and I lost her. I swear I tried. So you left 2 bodies in the water and said nothing? I called Rachel. She said if I reported it, we'd both go to prison. That people would think we planned it. So I made it look like they just disappeared. Lewis arrested him for manslaughter, evidence tampering, obstruction. Then she came back for Rachel. But Rachel knew what was coming. Had been expecting it since the envelope arrived. When Lewis returned with an arrest warrant, Rachel's lawyer advised her to stay silent. But Rachel was done with silence. You want to know the worst part, detective? Rachel's voice was hollow. I was there. That day. I rented a boat and followed them. I watched the whole thing from behind rocks 200 yards away. Lewis went still. I watched Thomas kill my husband. Watched my daughter jump into that freezing water. Watched her fight for her life while Thomas struggled with her. And I did nothing. I sat in my boat and let my 10-year-old daughter drown because I was too afraid to reveal that I'd been part of it. Part of planning your husband's murder? Yes, Thomas and I planned it. Ben was supposed to go alone. But Lily begged to come at the last minute. I tried to stop it. Those 17 calls were me trying to abort. But I couldn't reach Thomas in time. Rachel looked at Lewis with dead eyes. So yes, detective, I'm guilty. Of conspiracy. Of murder. Of watching my daughter die and choosing my own freedom over her life. I've lived with that for 12 years. And now you know. If this story has gripped you, if you need to know how this ends, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Have you ever kept a secret that destroyed you from the inside? Share your thoughts. Lewis placed handcuffs on Rachel's wrists. Rachel Morgan, you're under arrest. The woman who'd played the grieving mother for 12 years finally stopped pretending.